Hey, I'm Derek, it's me, Derek, and welcome to Past Mortem. Yeah, that's right, not a 3DO Doom punching weight, but a Past Mortem, our first one ever? And that is because the development story of 3DO Doom is so insane, so unbelievable, that I had to dedicate a whole video just to how it was made. Though it is a close race to the bottom when it comes to Doom console ports, 3DO Doom is often considered the worst. Now for me personally, Saturn Doom just edges it out. And then of course, PlayStation Final Doom, well, it knows what it did. But no port has had a more sordid history than the 3DO version. Yes, this port is bad. Very bad, even by bad Doom standards. But that it exists at all is a miracle. It has been nearly 30 years, and with only one readily available source, the exact points of what happened at what time are maybe a little muddy, but the major points and major players are all there. And yeah, I've touched on this topic before, but more about the story has come out over the years. Though by the end, I can't promise you won't feel a little awkward about that custom soundtrack. But anyway, welcome to Stop Skeletons and Fighting. Welcome to Past Mortem. And ladies and gentlemen, friends, this is the story of 3DO Doom. Perhaps best known as the console that unleashed Gex onto an unsuspecting populace, it might shock you to learn that the 3DO was a disorganized mess. The whole business model behind the console was a bit of an experiment, with a central 3DO company that not only had the normal third-party game developers, but also third-party system manufacturers, and all these companies had to coordinate. It did not go well, to put it mildly. The 3DO launched in October 1993 with an eye-popping suggested retail price of $6.99 and only one game. That one game, I'm not making this up, Crash and Burn. And on top of that, there weren't even that many systems to go around. While games eventually did come out for the 3DO, and even some good ones like D and Need for Speed, and the price eventually went way down, it was never a match for the giant gray elephant in the room. The one thing 3DO had going for it was its historically low licensing fees for software developers, only $3 per manufactured game. This was enough to attract tons of software developers looking for an opportunity, like the main character of our story, Randall Letcher Scott, president of up-and-coming game studio Art Data Interactive. Now Randy here was a floppy-haired man who claimed to have previously worked as, and this is directly from 3DO Magazine, VP of Sales at ABC International, where he was responsible for distributing games all over the world. Wow, that's pretty cool. But I have never heard of this company before. And since we're still getting to know Randy here, I decided to look this company up. As far as I can tell, according to this completely unrelated 1997 court document, ABC International, full name ABC International Traders Inc., was a, quote, wholesale distributor of telephone equipment and other electronics, which can include games. Turns out they used to own the trademark for micro games, which made a ton of LCD handhelds in the 80s and 90s, and sort of functioned as a worse Tiger Electronics, if you can believe such a thing ever actually existed. But anyway, experience with LCD games distribution doesn't exactly make Randy a video game expert. Looking back at the 3DO Magazine article, this seems like a lie of omission at best. I mean, sure, games, maybe even LCD games, but he's not exactly the insider he's trying to present himself as. Honestly, I have my doubts he ever touched a video game or was the VP of anything, for reasons that'll become clear over the course of this video. It would be a really weird thing to lie about, but it's not going to be the weirdest lie you're going to hear in this story. But one thing is for sure, Randy had a talk game. He was a salesman, if not a full-on confidence man. Somehow, he managed to convince people to give him tons of cash to invest in his new video game development company, Art Data Interactive, or ADI, formed in 1993. He says he raised a couple $1 million due to his industry connections. Okay, I'm side-eyeing that phrase, industry connections, but I've also seen claims that some of that money was fundraised from his church congregation. I don't know, maybe he and Bobby Kotick went to the same church? I'm joking. We all know that Kotick can't enter a church without bursting into flames. Digressions aside, ADI had enough money for an office in Simi Valley, Southern California, and several employees. But, and I cannot emphasize this enough, Randy seemed to have zero game development experience. In fact, I'm not even sure he knew how computers worked. Here is how he described the game development process. We all come in, play Doom for 6 to 7 hours, the non-creative people go home, and the creative people stay up all night. And the eye candy elf does his work. You come back in the morning, and there are lots of strange, magical things on everyone's screen. What the fuck are you talking about, Randy? Anyway, ADI's first project was publishing and distributing Rise of the Robots for 3DO in 1995, which, believe it or not, was a game people were stoked on, you know, before it actually came out. In any case, it was a bit of a get for ADI, you know, before it came out, and Randy was on the hunt for the next IP that would become a surefire hit. Meanwhile, while all this 3DO craziness was happening, Jaguar Doom came out in 1994 and opened the floodgates for console Doom. Not to mention that id was ready to get them Doom licensing fees, looking to fund Quake's development, and CarMax Ferrari have it. But here's the thing. id Software knew that based on the 3DO's capabilities, it would be really difficult to get a good port of Doom on the 3DO. So to weed out the unserious, they set the 3DO licensing rights at an astronomical price of $250,000. I'm only calling this astronomical because 3DO game sales were so low at this point in the console's lifespan, with average games clocking in at about 5,000 to 10,000 units, which would make it really difficult to turn a profit at that price. Basically, you'd either need to have some serious bona fides or be a headstrong idiot with a ton of money. And that, my friends, is how our boy Randy, a man with no meaningful industry connections or experience, was able to get the 3DO rights to Doom. So in mid to late 1994, money was exchanged and id Software gave Randy the 3DO rights to Doom, a promise of the rights of Doom 2 so long as Doom 1 sold well enough, and waved him out the door. As far as I can tell, the only major restriction was that the game had to be out by December 1995. So with the PC source code and a copy of the game in tow, Randy started to do what Randy did best. He started to sell. As early as December 1994, Randy was out promoting 3DO Doom and 3DO Doom 2, promising a massive upgrade of visuals, all new audio, plus new monsters, new weapons, and new levels. Okay, first of all, the audacity that this man thinks that he can improve Doom. At the time, there were like 4 people that could improve Doom, and they were all working on Quake. Anyway, by April 1995, he was boasting that Doom was ready to be mastered. I am just going to read an edited down version of what he told the interviewer from 3DO magazine because it is incredible. There is simply no comparison between the PC and 3DO versions. It's lost nothing. It's been improved upon, in fact. We're gonna pump up the screen resolution. We're not gonna sacrifice the gameplay for 1 second doing so. We're also gonna add a new, never-before-seen episode of Doom with new levels, new monsters, plus powers, and new weapons. Plus powers? What the hell is he talking about? Oh, and I skipped over this part earlier. He says to load up your rocket launchers and break up the suntan oil because this is the hottest version of Doom that you are ever gonna see. Well, that sounds amazing, Randy. Of course, none of these features actually existed. In fact, development hadn't even begun. Randy attempted to contract 2 different developer companies, with him ditching one after they quoted him 2 years and around $3 million, and the other one ditching Randy after he refused to pay them for reaching their first development milestone. Eventually, the 3DO company started to notice that the studio trying to bring a flagship game to their flagging system by October 95 didn't have much to show for it, despite claims that it was mostly finished. I wish I could tell you more about those first 2 developers, especially the one that apparently actually started work on 3DO Doom, but we only know about the 3rd developer, which is how we meet the other main character of this story, Rebecca Heineman, aka Burger Becky. Becky is a bit of a legend, winning the first ever national video game competition for Space Invaders in 1980, leveraging that into a programming career that included co-founding Interplay, programming the Bard's Tale trilogy, ports of Out of This World, aka Another World, Wasteland, and, most importantly for this channel, the Apple II GS, Super Nintendo, and 3DO ports of Wolfenstein 3D. That 3DO port, by the way, is probably the best console port of Wolf 3D. And having hands on that Super Nintendo port means she also deserves a tiny bit of credit for Super 3D Noah's Ark, which in this house is a compliment. But in 1995, she had just left Interplay and formed a new studio, Logicware. New studios need cash, so when the 3DO company reached out to her with a request to help out a company with an id console port that was at about 90%, but just needed some help getting over the finish line, she jumped at the chance. This was one of her specialties after all, and she was eager to get into the good graces of the 3DO company. So Becky and Randy hopped on a call together. He started doing his Randy thing, telling her that there were 2 other teams that had worked on this project, but both just quit suddenly. But hey, not a problem, that's why she's here. So she asked to see the code that the other teams had produced. And that's when things started to take a turn. And before we get much further, just so you know, this story comes from what Heinemann has revealed over the years, and the details have changed slightly with each retelling, but the basic outline has remained the same. For reasons that'll become clear at the end of the video, I was not able to reach out to Randy to ask his side of the story. Anyways, Randy said that he could get the second team's code, but that they hadn't given it to him yet. Okay, not necessarily a red flag, but then he hit with this whammy. How about I pay you after the game ships? And there we go, there's Randy, there's the real Randy. Now she's actually met him. Now luckily, Burger Becky, who by the way got that nickname because of her habit of having a dedicated burger drawer at work on the Napoleon Dynamite's tots, wasn't having any of that and negotiated $10,000 just to start the project, which Randy reluctantly accepted. Becky basically then twiddled her thumbs for 2 weeks, waiting for the other team's code, or at least its software source code. Randy kept giving her the runaround, asking her to just start development with what she already had, which was nothing. It's unclear why Randy didn't give her the source code he bought from its software, but I wager it's because he had zero idea what the hell that was. Finally, she got a floppy disk, but it was full of JPEGs of weapons Randy wanted her to put in the game. Hey, where the hell did this 90% port go? What is going on? She called him and tried to explain that she can't do anything without the game code. And Randy is completely confused. Don't you have a copy of the game already? Yep. Turns out this guy knew so little about game development, he thought that all you needed to port a game was a retail copy. You know, just put the PC disc inside the 3DO and the eye candy fairies make it all work. Right, Randy? By this point, it was July 95. Remember, this game needed to come out by December at the latest or the rights would expire. So Becky, being a sensible person, quit the project, which of course sent Randy complaining to the 3DO company, who called Becky in a panic. Why did you abandon the game? What game? Apparently, they had already started prototyping boxes with screenshots that Randy had provided, which were actually PC screenshots with weapon drawings just photoshopped onto them. And believe me, if those screenshots were out there somewhere, we would be showing them to you right now. Believe me. So the 3DO company is in a huge bind. Their console was underperforming. Sega Saturn was out. PS1 and 64 were on the horizon, and it would be a huge embarrassment if this fantastical version of Doom, which Randy had been promoting for months now, didn't actually come out. So Becky agreed to resume work as a favor to 3DO, but it was clear she couldn't really depend on Randy and would have to take the initiative. Since she'd worked with id Software before, she was able to call up John Carmack herself to ask for the source code for any console port. Carmack, being a solid dude, sends her the source code for Jaguar Doom, and Becky sets to work. After 2 more weeks, she was able to assimilate the code to get it to build. Basically just to de-Jaguar it, which finally set up a foundation for the rest of the 3DO port. She then called up the 3DO company and explained that it's gonna take 6 to 9 months to really get it working on 3DO. They gave her 10 weeks. And that isn't because they're heartless. Remember, one of the few stipulations of the licensing rights was they gotta get something out by December. Randy's incompetence and the 3DO company's mismanagement had finally collided, and Becky found herself right in the middle. And because Becky is a sensible person, she quit again. I'm just kidding. She didn't actually, because the 3DO company convinced Art Data to pay Becky twice the normal going rate for a conversion job, from about $20,000 to $40,000. So with reluctance, but also the well-being of her new studio in mind, she accepted the job and got back on the line with Randy. I'm sure they had some enlightening discussion like, well, can't you just plop a Jaguar cartridge into a 3DO disc slot? I mean, he might have said something like that, we don't actually know. But he did ask her this: when are you gonna add in the cutscenes? The what? Excuse me? Cutscenes? What? Yeah, sorry for bearing the lead on the cutscenes, but this story was complicated enough already. So, as if all of this wasn't bad enough, while this Doom development nonsense is going on, ADI was making another game. Chess Wars, a medieval fantasy for 3DO and DOS. Actually, scratch that. Just DOS because, shocker, this game also had a trouble development and did not actually release on 3DO. Also, when I say they were making Chess Wars, what I mean is that in probably mid to late 1994, ADI spent a reported $500,000 on a film shoot with 18 actors, 6 stuntmen, and over 100 extras for battle chess, but with actors. Chess Wars ended up having over an hour of video crammed into it, but, according to Moby Games, only one developer. The actual game development was an afterthought. I am sensing a pattern here. And to add insult to injury, Battle Chess, the game that Chess Wars was ripping off, was a game that Rebecca's company Interplay developed in 1988 and got ported to the 3DO! The whole thing is super interesting. For sure, Alex here deserves his own video too, but we have to get back to Doom and its supposed cutscenes. One of the companies working on this Chess Wars shoot was Global Effects, which specializes in props and costumes for Hollywood movies, and they are legit with a resume that spans decades, and of course includes this monstrosity. Your eyes do not deceive you, that is a Doom Cyber Demon costume, or at least an approximation of one. Art Data Interactive actually did make cutscenes for Doom, and yes, there is photographic proof. I reached out to Global Effects and spoke to Chris Gilman, president and founder, as well as the man, the myth, the legend behind these photos. Turns out, the 3DO Doom costume is based off of a Minotaur costume Global Effects already had lying around. Normally, a totally new creature would cost $30,000 to $50,000, but ADI only had to fork over $10,000 because they only needed a new head and hands for their Cyber Demon. The rest of this I'm pulling from this awesome article at Time Extension by Jack Yarwood, which is linked in the description below. Basically, Gilman and crew brought the costume and some props to ADI's office in Simi Valley. And friends, I hope you're sitting down. Art Data didn't know what they were doing and set up a green screen that was both too small and too close to the actors. I'm also gonna guess there wasn't even a script. I'd be shocked if there was actually a script. Apparently only about a minute of footage was made, but they really tried to do this. Can you believe that this had actually happened? Like for the Doom reboot, they pulled Rip and Tear from the comic books. What if there existed a Doom game where he had a love interest? I guess we can only imagine what could have been. You know, if every single circumstance was different. But the craziest part of all of this is that it happened way back in '94, potentially before the ink had dried on ADI's deal with its software. I know this because the Doom costume was photographed at 1995's Consumer Electronics Show, which took place in very early January. And how do I know it was there? Because there is tiny proof at the end of Game Fan Magazine's 1995 CES feature. Plus, there was also a Usenet post from a week after the show describing the resulting FMV as such, with the acting quality of Baywatch and the special effects of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Yes, it was that bad, and no Pamela Anderson to distract you from its failings. Just a wimpy Darian Lambert look and feel alike as our hero. Okay, that last reference didn't age very well. I had to look this up. Darian Lambert is a character from the short-lived TV show Time Tracks, and I'm sure we can all imagine the vibe. But if you are like me, I'm sure you are thinking, what happened to that costume? Well, it disintegrated in the years since, and yes, I did try to rent it because it has been listed on their website for, I'm guessing, 30 years? Can you believe a piece of Doom history has just been hiding in plain sight, undiscovered on some random special effects company's website for decades? Shout out to Marfy Black for tweeting about it back in July, and Sean for poking us about it a week later. Y'all are really the ones who got the ball rolling on this video. Anyways, back to Randy and Becky. It is now August '95. There is just 10 weeks to get a technically playable version of Doom off to get mastered and produced. ADI agreed on paper to Becky's plan for a straight Jaguar port, but Becky decided to report to the 3DO company mostly instead, and that's because Randy kept pestering her with insane feature requests. New levels, those damn cutscenes, more weapon JPEGs, you can probably imagine. 2 weeks into this 10-week schedule, she realized she had a problem. Jaguar Doom had sound effects. But no music. But what if there was a way to get music but also distract Randy? Here's how Becky told it in a 2022 presentation.
And then, that's when the CEO of Art Data, when he was once again on the phone begging me to put in these cutscenes, mentioned that he has a band. Kill two birds with one stone. make him think he's helping out this game, which he was actually, so I will give him that. And B, get him off my back.
So Becky played the original Doom songs into a cassette tape and sent them to ADI's office. Every 2 or 3 days, a new track would trickle in, and unfortunately, gotta hand it to him. It's clear Randy and his bandmates had legit musical chops, but we're not extremely familiar with Doom. The result is a solid but kind of loose interpretation of the iconic soundtrack. It is also one of the most fascinating games of musical telephone. Bobby Prince reinterpreted Pantera and other bands into MIDI, and then Randy reinterpreted those songs with real instruments. It is actually pretty good, or you will have to take my word for it, because I decided not to include any of it in this video. So with Randy occupied, Becky was really able to get to work, and it sounded like the crunch from hell. You know, no sleep, no shower, only 3DO, for weeks on end. Even still, while she was working her ass off, Randy was constantly bugging her for feature requests, asking for online multiplayer on an offline console. If she wasn't able to make new levels, maybe she could just rip something off of the internet? And hey, how are those cutscenes coming along? On that front, I truly don't know what they expected Becky to do. How is she supposed to rotoscope this poorly filmed footage? So she just pretended that she never got them. I guess that's the real reason this game doesn't have the FMV sequences. Becky just literally pretended that they never existed. At long last, at week 8 of 10, the game was playable. Which, like, wow, I guess that means that not only did Becky actually pull this off, she did it ahead of schedule? One problem though, it ran at 8 frames per second. It was so bad that even Randy was like, this seems a bit chuggy. The 3DO company was like, hey, what you have been able to do is incredible, but the bottom floor has to be 15 FPS. And that is why Doom for the 3DO has such a small screen. It was the only way to hit that 15 FPS requirement consistently. Though, ADI had required that the game had to be in full screen. So Becky threw in a cheat code that would allow full screen, and the promise to Randy that it would look awesome once the successor to the 3DO, the M2, came out. Which of course it never did. Shockingly, while it ran like a bowl of mashed potatoes, there weren't really any bugs, so they sent it off to Goldmaster at the 3DO company, and it worked. Say what you want about 3DO Doom. It is not good, but it is functional, and that's all it needed to be. I can't imagine how amazing Becky felt at that moment. I hope she slept for weeks on a bed of burgers. But there was still trouble on the horizon. If you've been keeping track at home, old Randall Scott had been racking up quite a bill for 3DO Doom. From my count at least, it's $250,000 for the Doom license, $40,000 for Burger Becky, which Randy actually tried to stiff her on, but she refused to hand over the final disc to the 3DO company until he paid her. Queen shit. Around $10,000 for the Cyber Demon costume, not to mention, I don't know, film crew, props, actors, and equipment. Also, whatever it cost to take the suit to CES, plus whatever maintaining several staff and an office space in Simi Valley costs, even the cost of shipping songs. Speaking of which, there is no way the other people in the band got paid any money. But bottom line, it was a lot of money he had to make back. So Randy, well, he pulled a Randy. He decided to order 50,000 copies of 3DO Doom. Oh, the schadenfreude is just immaculate. Numbers for this are hard to track down, but just so you know, around this time in 1995, there were about 250,000 3DOs total in the US. And like I said earlier, the average 3DO game sold about 5,000 to 10,000 units, and Randy was doing 50,000. He is the definition of the guy who doesn't know when to fold them. By the way, this added at least an extra $150,000 just on licensing and manufacturing from the 3DO company. Arc Data Interactive made their December deadline, but just barely, releasing 3DO Doom on December 29th, 1995. For the record, the PlayStation version of Doom, which obliterated this version in every way imaginable, had been out for months already. Just imagine if Randy had spent less time promoting the game, even like 2 months less. Not only did they miss the holiday season, the game was ripped to shreds in the reviews and only managed to sell about 10,000 copies. Which, while that was only 20% of his inventory, maybe still makes it one of the better selling 3DO games ever? Maybe? There's even footage of Randy trying to promote the game for a Japanese release in 1996, looking completely exhausted and broken, though still trying to talk up 3DO Doom's 6 levels of speed. You mean 6 different shitty levels of frame rate there, Randy? I can almost admire that he was still trying to squeeze blood from that stone. And I can't believe I had to say this in a video about 3DO Doom, but content warning for a brief discussion of alleged child abuse. Fast forward about 30 seconds if you do not want that in your life, and if you don't want that in your life right now, I wouldn't blame you. So where are they now? Art Data Interactive closed in 1996 after Chess Wars also didn't sell well. And Randy, well, he went on to start a music school. And if you're familiar with this story at all, you know where this is going. And if you don't, I hate to be the one to have to tell you this, but Randy is currently awaiting trial for some truly heinous accused crimes. Unfortunately, with YouTube the way it is, I don't want to risk demonetization or worse for even mentioning what he allegedly did. But suffice it to say, his music school for children is no longer operational, and I hope that everyone allegedly involved is able to heal and get the justice they deserve. As for the 3DO company, they paved the way for the N-Gage and Zeebo with an ill-advised late-game marketing tactic of announcing an upcoming console, the M2, which never happened. I mean, when your best-selling game is Gex, you might be in some trouble, but they did an admirable job holding down the fort until the nuclear bomb that was the PlayStation finally arrived in North America. The 3DO company eventually sold off its hardware manufacturing rights and transitioned into a software developer / publisher. They actually scored some decent hits with Army Men and Heroes of Might and Magic before finally filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2003. The person who makes off the best in this story is Burger Becky. Logicware closed down in 1999 after Valve canceled their Mac OS 9 port of Half-Life. She went on to form Contraband Entertainment, which worked on projects like Myth 3: The Wolf Age and Activision Anthology. She even maintained that 3DO connection by making the Mac port of Heroes of Might and Magic 4. Becky has had a long and storied career in the industry. This just happens to be a particularly interesting chapter in her career. Through it all, she's remained largely independent, with lots of consulting work thrown in. She is currently the CEO of Old School, an independent company that formerly had some sort of development deal with Stadia? Oh man, well, you know, she's probably been through worse. It is 2023. This channel is entering its 16th year. We want to say thank you to all our Patreon supporters. We would have not made it anywhere near this far without their support. If you want to support us on Patreon, please do. If you can't though, just subscribe, hit the bell, tell a friend, support us where you can. And you know what? That's gonna do it. But real quick before we go, welcome to Shelf Talk. We're gonna wrap up with a whole bunch of Castlevania stuff. I did a video on the Gamecom version of Symphony of the Night, and I wasn't able to do a live shot, so here's all my Symphony of the Night stuff. Grace says we need more jokes in this segment. You want a joke? The American cover of Symphony of the Night. Because look at the Japanese cover. Are you kidding me? What? I mean, I get it, like, no one knows who Alucard is. Like, that probably sold more, but like...
But as soon as you see this picture, you're gonna want to know.
What the hell, yeah.
Who he is. You know what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah. Hey, you know what? You live for eternity. I bet you just hit it all. Japanese guide here for Symphony of the Night, or Nocturne in the Moonlight. I got that in Japan. Have more Castlevania, and then maybe the single most underrated game ever is Cave Noir, also a Konami joint. Derek, what are you doing with the Bloodborne? With the Bloodborne, that's not a Castlevania. Squint your eyes and kind of like tilt your head while you're playing Bloodborne, and just imagine it's a Castlevania game. It's an honorary Castlevania game. Also, can you believe this is good graphics? Look at this cover art. Oh man. You know what? Like, new graphics are great.
This is peak. The N64 has mind-boggling effects.
Yeah. And then also, I hear some Silent Hill stuff. I don't know. And then I also had some extra. I didn't know where to put the NES games.
And next to your heart.
Put the NES games right here where they belong. Next to my face, because they're too important for the shelf, I guess. Castlevania's great. Thank you for watching the Symphony of the Night video, by the way. All right, well, I gotta go so I can finish the platinum on Vampire Survivors. But thank you for watching. This has been Shelf Talk. Hold on, Dollop is sleeping.
Dollop's sleeping.
And sleepy dogs. Both dogs are sleepy and hiding, and they want to go outside and probably get treats, I'm sure. Bye!